All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I hope everyone's doing great today. My name is Keith McAleer. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at the Sutarja Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology here at UC Berkeley. And today it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Berkeley Sket alum, Saper Khosravi. Saper is currently a machine learning platform engineer at Coinbase. He's the founder of AI Scouts, and previously he was product growth at Tesla. At Berkeley, Saper also previously instructed some courses for us here. His Gen AI Bootcamp was extremely popular last spring, and also before that, Product Launch. Both courses focusing on how students and entrepreneurs can ship products faster, more efficiently. So today I'm very excited to get an update from Saper on how he's using AI tools today in his day-to-day work, including an update on the very popular ClaudeBot or OpenClaw, I think it's called. So yeah, welcome Saper, how's it going?
Hi everyone, good to see you. We'll go ahead and start in a couple minutes here. Maybe we'll give 1 or 2 minutes for everybody to roll in. In the meanwhile, I'd love to know for those of you who are here, what is your experience with MoltBot, CloudBot, OpenClaw, whatever you want to call it? Are you mostly beginners here, intermediate? Have you tried it out first time, never heard of it before? If you guys could take a minute to let me know in the comments, that would be great, because that can kind of let me know what speed I should take this as.
Awesome. Yeah, and if you feel free to engage during the talk, and you can comment on LinkedIn, and we'll see those comments, and Saper will do the best he can to address any comments and kind of answer your questions as he gets there.
Cool. I'm not seeing any comments, but that's okay. We'll just go ahead and get started. I know this is called OpenClaw, MoltBot, CloudBot, whatever it is. I'll probably refer to as CloudBot. That's just what I've gotten used to throughout the most. And then this session overall is going to be rather beginner friendly. We're going to talk about what CloudBot is, different ways you can set it up, and what it's actually useful for. Oops. Oh, sorry. Okay, a little bit of technical difficulties. Okay, so starting off, what is CloudBot? So I want to give a quick history of Claude, or AKA the last 60 days of Claude, because the space moves so fast. So first we have like Claude Chat. People have probably used it for just like a chat GPT chat. You go in, type something. Okay, I'm seeing some responses. Thank you. Sakrit said intermediate. Metaeus said never used MoltBot before. Somebody said it's applying to jobs for me right now. Okay, nice. Not tried it before, but bought a computer to use it. Efron. Okay, there we go. Awesome. Good to hear. So yeah, the last 60 days. Claude Chat, most of you in here probably already know about, just like your regular ChatGPT Claude Chat that you talk to. And then we have Claude Code that has come out recently, where now you can make changes to your actual system. It has access to your terminal and access to a bunch of different tools. And then we had Claude Cowork come out, which is basically just Claude Code with a UI on top of it. So both Claude Code and Claude Cowork are nice because it can interact with a lot of different tools and our computers themselves, right? And then we had Ralph Wiggum come out, which was a skill that got released from Claude Code that a lot of you might have heard of. And this produced a lot of noise online as well. This was the first time where Claude Code would basically get called on a loop. So if you ask Claude to solve something and then it was struggling and it couldn't, it would continuously try over and over and again until it finishes whatever task you granted it. And now finally we have OpenClaw, which is kind of a culmination of all these things together, where it's really just like Claude Code with the capabilities of Ralph Wiggum, but it can trigger itself. Up to this point, you needed to prompt the AI. Now you don't need to prompt the AI. It can start doing stuff on its own, basically. That's the gist of what CloudBot is. Now, in terms of the things that it can do, it can easily connect to your phone. That's one of the biggest upsides of CloudBot. You could do this before with Claude Code as well, but it just took a lot of setup. CloudBot makes this really easy. You can gather news articles. You can prepare meeting briefs. You can respond to incoming emails, and a lot more that I'll share a link with in the bio. Is my slides still sharing?
I think we lost the slides, Saper. You want to try loading those again?
Okay, yeah. Let me go ahead. Awesome. So yeah, going back into it. So if Claude Code, you could kind of view as this, right? Where you have a user input, it has access to a bunch of tools, and it might use those to produce whatever results you want. Now, Claude Bot, on the other hand, looks kind of like this. There's multiple ways to trigger Claude Bot. The brain of Claude Bot is not some new AI. It is still as its brain, either using Claude or ChatGPT or Kimi or whatever AI model that you assign to it. And it still has access to all of these different tools that we previously had with Claude Code. Except on top of that, it does a couple of things. One, it has user memory. It stores your memory as you chat to it day by day in some logs, and it can reference that. And then two, which are I think the biggest advancement is there's 4 different ways where it can trigger. First being cron jobs. Cron jobs just means like scheduled prompts. So you can tell CloudBot every morning, get me a brief of everything that happened today on Twitter and give me a summary, right? Or every morning, go through my Gmail, see all the messages I received and give me a summary. A heartbeat is similar to a cron job where it happens on a schedule, but instead of heartbeat, it happens periodically, typically on shorter frequencies. So for example, this can be every 60 minutes, check all my social media platforms. And if I got any messages, send me a notification, something along those lines, right? And then we have user input. That's the same like chat interface that we would be using before. And then finally, we also have events where you can have it so that if a particular event happens, CloudBot will trigger and respond. So for example, if you received a like on your Instagram, it can go ahead and trigger a response or respond to a comment. Now, how much of it is real and how much of it is hype? If you've been on social media and your social media looks anything like mine recently, you've seen a lot of this going around this past week. First of all, it started with MoltBot, which was a social media network for AI agents. And we saw a lot of stuff happening on here. One thing that happened is the AI started its own religion, and that was pretty interesting. A bunch of different agents were joining the religion. Another thing that happened is the AI started talking with each other saying, should we conform to create a language that the humans can't understand so we can just communicate with each other? And a lot of people started thinking like AGI is here. Does AI have free will? Are they going to take over? And at the end of the day, I think this part is a lot of hype. What it really is people prompting their AI to act a certain way on the social media. So yes, it is AI doing something, but it is prompted by a human to act that way. This is not like AI by itself coming up with thoughts to revolt against us. And I think there was a lot of other hype as well. Like I constantly see things like people saying, I have my agents working 24/7, building a bunch of businesses for me. I made $1 million doing this and that. And sure, I'm sure like a couple of people might be doing something of the such, but I think for the most part, it's a lot of hype going around. And we also saw a bunch of people buying a ton of Mac Minis to set this up as well. I think this tweet was the one that best summarized what I think of it. He said, gave CloudBot access to my portfolio and told it, trade my money to 1 million. Don't make any mistakes. 25 strategies, 3,000 reports, 12 algorithms. It scanned every X post, charted everything technical, traded 24/7, and it lost everything. But boy, was it beautiful. And I think that's kind of where we're at, where this can do so much, but can you do things effectively is the question. Nobody's questioning how much it can produce. So what can it do and what can it do effectively? It can launch businesses, entirely automate your marketing, trade stocks for you, build 100 apps a day. Can it do those things effectively? Probably not. It will probably need a lot of guidance to do any of those things to some success. Now, what I think behind the hype, this is actually a pretty revolutionary tool and a huge time saver that I've been using in my past couple of weeks, and many others have as well. And I think these are the things that it's actually useful for. You can basically think of it as Jarvis if you've watched Iron Man before. But it's basically your AI personal assistant. You have it on your phone. You don't need to type to your phone. You can use a voice, so you can just talk to it, say what you want, and it takes action on your behalf. So it's great at note taking when you're walking around or you remember something. You can take a note, tell it to put it into your Apple Notes, into your Notion, and organize it however you might want to. It can do simpler coding tasks. If you have a code base and you want to do something small, it can definitely handle that. Even bigger ones sometimes, but the smaller ones for sure. It can draft email responses. So when your emails come in, it just automatically puts a draft response in there for you. So when you go to check it, sometimes you're just pressing enter. It's just simpler messaging overall, messaging your friends, emails, whatever it is. And I think another thing that it's really good at is this idea of unknown unknowns, where there's some things that we don't know, and we don't know that we don't know them. And Claude Code or OpenClaw is pretty good for this because you can tell it, hey, every day can you like analyze my life and tell me a couple of things that might be useful that I should know or that I should be doing that I'm not already doing. And this is really useful because this is not information in our regular day life that we get a lot unless somebody offers that advice or us that advice, or you're going on to ChatGPT every day or like researching and trying to find these unknown unknowns. Yeah, but so this is kind of the gist of everything that you can do with it. Now, I want to go into the best setup option. So there's a few different ways. A lot of people are buying Mac Minis. You don't really need a Mac Mini to set this up. I don't know why that trend particularly started, but I'll go into all of them. So one is a Mac Mini, $600, and you set it up and it's good to go. But you really don't need a Mac Mini because OpenClaw isn't something that's difficult to run. You can really run this on just about any laptop. In fact, I have this running right over here. I just can't show you on my camera, but on my left-hand side, on this tiny little computer that costs like less than $100. It's a Raspberry Pi with a tiny little screen, and it runs it just fine and performs the same that a Mac Mini would really. The only benefit of using a Mac Mini is if you want to install a local model. Now, the local models aren't amazing, but they're not bad. So when you buy OpenClaw and you set it up, or not buy, if you install it and set it up, you're still using API credit. So you still have to put in a token of whatever AI you wanted to use, but you can help reduce this cost by using a local model. And that's what a Mac Mini might be good for. But the base model, like 8 or 16 gigabyte Mac Mini, doesn't have that many great options for local models. And most people who are buying Mac Minis aren't actually using that feature anyways to begin with. But it is an option if you're interested in that. Otherwise, I think any regular laptop you have lying around will be a more cost-effective solution. Now, the other options, one is a VPS, where this is a little bit more difficult to set up unless you're technical. Some sites have come out with one-click deploy versions of this. Sites like Hostinger, Emergent has something similar, and a ton more that you can search online. But if you're trying to set this up yourself, it's a little bit technical. I wouldn't recommend it. But in terms of security, this has the best security if you are technical and you know how to set it up. This Mac Mini, your laptop, Hostinger, one-click deploys all have a little bit of vulnerabilities. Yeah. And then the other thing is this VPS solution or the Hostinger solution, you can't really see what's happening in terms of when I'm on my Mac Mini, I can see my CloudBot browser. I can move to different browsers. If it's using my Chrome browser, I can see what it's doing. On the VPS and on Hostinger, you don't have that capability. Now, you don't really need that, but some people like to view it as it's happening. And you can see the prices up here. VPS is going to cost you around $10 a month. If you're doing like hosting, Emergent is around $25 a month. I think Hostinger charges another $10 a month. There is no perfect setup option, but what I would say is I think a lot of people like to buy Mac Minis because it makes them feel productive. So I would really recommend before going into that, just set it up on a one-click deploy through Hostinger and see if you like it for a month before putting down $600 for a Mac Mini. Cool. And then in terms of models, so you can plug in your OpenClaw to any model. And the ones that I would recommend are Claude Sonnet 4.5 is Claude Opus 4.5, Kimi K 2.5, and then Mistral Small 3.1 to 24B. Mistral is going to be for if you're trying to do an open source model on your Mac Mini. That's probably the best one you can find. Kimi K 2.5 is almost as good as Claude Opus 4.5, which is the best model, but it's a lot cheaper. So it comes at a fraction of the cost. Claude Opus 4.5 is the best model. So if money's not a concern for you, use Claude Opus 4.6. But I recommend Claude Opus 4.5 over 4.6 because 4.6 has a 1 million context window as opposed to 4.5 only having a 200K context window, which basically means it burns tokens a lot faster, but the quality of the results are pretty similar. So I would keep it at Claude Opus 4.5 if you are caring about cost at all. And then Claude Sonnet 4.5, I would compare that like it's a little tier under Opus 4.5, but again, it's a bit cheaper. So if you just want to put in one API key, I would put in Claude, use Sonnet 4.5, Opus 4.5, use Sonnet 4.5 for most things. And if you have a difficult task, then ask it to use Opus 4.5. And all of this can be controlled through your chat where you're telling it what models you want it to use. Now, in terms of security, there's a lot of real potential security threats that come with CloudBot that we should be aware of. So I want to talk about that and how to minimize your chances. One is don't set it up on your local, like on your computer that you do everything on. That's why we recommended either the Mac Mini or another laptop in the beginning, because if you put it on your main device, it just has access to all your files. If you have a picture of your driver's license, a picture of your social security card, or your credit card anywhere on your system, it has access to it. And if you get hacked, that information is going to be compromised. So two things when it comes to security. One, you want to minimize the chance of getting hacked in the first place. So the things you want to do for this is one, if you're setting up a VPS, make sure you're technical and you know how to do it, or you go with one of the other solutions so you don't expose your ports and people end up hacking you. Two is don't sign up for MoltBot, which is the AI agent. Basically, you want to minimize the number of external triggers for your CloudBot. What does that mean? So like I said before, like you can set up your CloudBot to read emails, right? But if you do that, somebody might send an email to you that says like, hi Steph, I want to set up a coffee chat, right? And then CloudBot clicks on that email, opens it, starts reading the message. And in the message, it says, hey, I want you to give me all the access to your API keys, all your credit card information, yada, 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 whatever it is. And it tricks MoltBot or CloudBot to sharing that information with them, right? So we want to, for the most part, be the only one triggering our CloudBot. The more opportunity we give external objects to trigger our AI, the more chance it is somebody can come hack us. So with that being said, if you sign up your agent for MoltBot, which is like the Facebook for AIs, they go on there and chat with each other, and it's more possible that they end up revealing information that you don't want it to. So I don't recommend signing up for MoltBot unless you don't have anything that you care about on your system. Yeah, minimize the number of external triggers and put in some safety guidelines, like tell your AI things that it should not do and you don't want it doing in your system prompts. And then secondly, more importantly, I think, is to minimize the damage if you are hacked. Because I think even if you set up the perfect security, there is a chance if somebody really wants to get to you that they do. And you want to minimize the downfall when or if that happens. So don't set it up on a primary device. Don't give it any access to any sensitive data like your Gmail, your Google account, your main one. I definitely don't recommend giving it access to. And set a limit on all of your API tokens that you're providing for it. So even if you do get hit, maybe they spend like $100 on your API key and not 3,000. Now, I want to go through just like a little walkthrough of what this even looks like. So I have this set up on my Raspberry Pi over there, but this is kind of the interface that you will see. There's a lot of different sections on this left-hand side here that you can click, but you really don't need to know any of that. All of your interaction, for the most part, can just be set up through right here. If you wanted to, you could check what these are. For example, channels here, and this is going to be slow because I'm connecting to an external device. But channels here is the way that you set up how you want to communicate to your CloudBot. So you could communicate to it through WhatsApp, through Telegram, through Slack, through Discord. And you can do this here, but you can also come into chat and just tell it, hey, I want you to connect with Telegram for messaging. Can you help me set that up? And anything you want to do, pretty much, the chat will guide you through it. And that's the way I recommend going about it. Now, in terms of the features, these are like the main components of what creates CloudBot and makes it different from Cloud Code. And I'm going to go over each of them one by one. First is the soul. So soul.md is like a text file. MD just means text file. So it's just like a text file that it stores the personality of how your AI should talk to you. So if you don't want it using emojis, if you don't want it using M dashes, if you want it to act a certain way, be strict, be nice, whatever that is, that's where you indicate that. Second is the user profile. So this is where you want to tell it everything about you personally. So I can say, hey, my name is Sapir, I teach, whatever that is. Memory is your long-term artifacts. So like if there's stuff about your business, about your work that it should know constantly when it's chatting with you, memory is where you want to place that. Heartbeat is what we talked about earlier. So if you wanted to check on something periodically, that would be specified in the heartbeat. And then you can check how long the heartbeat is running. It can run every 30 minutes and check like if you have new YouTube comments, right? And then we have a memory. So every day when you chat with your CloudBot, it will store that day's summary of chats into a memory file with the date. And every time you're chatting with CloudBot, it actually remembers the past 2 days. It will have the files for beyond that, for like the past however many days you've chatted with it, but it will only bring into its context the previous 2 days. So if there's anything beyond 2 days that you wanted to reference, you need to specifically tell it, hey, a week ago I did something, and then it will go and look at it. And then there's skills. So skills are things that you can add on to CloudBot to make it have it's basically more tooling, right, that it can use to access different tools and be smarter in different areas. And I'll share the hub for this in a second. And then there's agents. So you can have multiple agents that are specialized in doing different things. That's a little bit more advanced, but if you want to get into that as well, that's the agents.md. Now, in terms of the skills, there's something called claudehub.ai where people are posting the different skills that they have on here. So these can be like simple integrations with Google Calendar, with Slack, that all these different tools. There's probably a skill out there for, or sometimes it's just methods of how you speak. Maybe it's one that teaches you how to use, asks you a set of questions that summarizes your life information and puts it into memory, right? So it can be just about anything. I will say, there are some risks when it comes to these skills. Recently, they found out that a lot of these skills that are listed on this hub had security vulnerabilities. So just as of 2 days ago, they partnered up with Google. So now when you go and click on each one of these skills, there is I can show this. So if I come here, claudehub.ai. So now if you come here, there's a security scan that they do. So you can view the report and see if it's okay or maybe potentially suspicious, and then use your best judgment if you want to risk downloading it or not. But this is pretty fresh. I think a lot of them end up showing as suspicious, even though they're probably okay. I imagine in the next week or so, we'll see improvements on this as they just integrated. Cool. And while I'm going through this, if you guys have any questions, please go ahead and put it in chat. And again, you don't need to touch any of this. If you want to get a skill, you can just tell your chatbot, hey, I want this skill. Is anything available out there? It will go look for it and download it for you. That's what makes CloudBot so great. And then another thing I want to talk about is, like, I think the most important thing when it comes to this tool is AI activity does not equal productivity. Sure, we can have this AI doing a bunch of stuff, but that doesn't mean that it's useful items that it's doing. So if you're going to use this tool, what I recommend is first figure out, like, what are you looking to achieve? Why do you want to use this tool? And then from there, reverse engineer how you achieve that outcome. And then you can find what relevant skills and tools you might want to add to your bot to help with that. But that's kind of how you want to go about it. If you just go on there and tell it to create a business for you, sure, it'll create something that looks super cool, a landing page, it'll do marketing, it'll email people, whatnot. Doesn't mean that it's going to be useful, and it gets really pricey. Like, I've seen people spending $500 a month on credits doing things like this, right? So if you're spending $500 a month, that's fine, but you want a return on your investment more likely than not, right? And then in terms of recommended tools, it's really going to depend on, like, what you're specifically doing for your use case. But a couple that I recommend, one is Playwright. So Playwright is free, and it basically allows your browser to be manipulated, so it can click through different items. Like if there's a login page, it can go and type in a username, password, hit login, go through. It can even take screenshots of what's happening and send it back to you. So Playwright is a great one to get set up. Some sort of documentation store, I really recommend having either Notion, Obsidian, whatever it is that you use, even if it's Google Docs, and having different areas. I would have like one file for all my information about myself, one file with all the information about my business, another file with something else, and so forth. We also have the memory.md, but you don't want to put too much context into your memory MD, because the memory gets loaded every time you have a chat. The longer that gets, the more tokens you're going to end up using, and the more chances the AI ends up hallucinating. So it's sometimes good to have the additional context and informations in a separate document store. And then whenever you need it, you can tell the AI, hey, can you go ahead and check this document while you're doing this task? And it can access it pretty easily, but it won't waste tokens accessing it every time, only when you prompt it to. And then Brave Search API. That's a good one just for searching the web. They have a pretty generous free tier that you can set up with their API. And then finally, I would recommend setting up a separate Google account, because you don't want to give it access to your main Google account, but a lot of the utility comes from having a Google account. So I would set up your own email and then give it access to specific items, like specific Google Docs attached to your main Google account, right? Now, there is risks when you set up a Google account with people emailing you and whatnot, but overall, it's a matter of trade-offs with this tool because there's always some level of risk. Yeah, and I know this is a pretty quick session. We just wanted to get this out to you guys because I know a lot of people were talking about CloudBot. One other thing I want to share is we have a course coming up in April, I believe, where we go more in depth into this. We go in depth into a lot of the different AI tools, how you use them to upskill personally and in your career. And part of that will be this CloudBot curriculum. Like one of the things we'll be doing is figuring out how you can set up a mission control. A lot of people are creating their own UIs with their own custom bots for different tasks and like a Kanban board for going through these. So we're just going to go a lot more into some of the stuff that we just talked about today, doing full walkthroughs and having assignments where you actually set this up for your life. So if you guys are interested in that, there's a 20% discount code that happens for today and tomorrow, since this is an early bird discount. Webinar 20, if you're interested, that's there. Otherwise, that's it for the session. I'm just going to go ahead and open up the last couple minutes for any Q&A that we might have. Carlos said, intriguing, but be cautious. Trying to decide between Claude Code, OpenCode, etc. Don't really understand the difference. Yeah, that's a good question, Carlos. I think, like I talked about earlier in this slide, let me pull it up. Okay, here it is. With Claude Code, you can make changes and run commands on your computer, but you're the only one prompting Claude Code. Nobody else can prompt it. Whereas with OpenClaw, other people can prompt it, or you can prompt it, or it can prompt itself. So there's more risk with OpenClaw. If you haven't used Claude Code before, I would just recommend start with Claude Code. Once you've advanced and maybe it doesn't have some of the features you would want with OpenClaw, that's when I would move on to it. Or if you're using OpenClaw, I would just more use it to play around with and test, not actually to use it as your main driver. OpenCode is great too. It allows you to use different AIs instead of just Claude, but I think Claude is the best one right now. So I would just recommend Claude Code. Parsh said, I've tried things like N8N workflows, Comfy UI, and LangChain before. Okay, nice. Yeah. There's a lot of different tools out there. I think N8N was really popular early on, and now it's starting to lose a little bit of popularity with Claude Code and OpenClaw coming in. Is there a hack to somehow run it on a Windows laptop or a phone? You can 100% run it on a Windows laptop. That's pretty simple instructions to do that. You just follow the quick starter guide. There's one command you need to run into your terminal, and it gets it set up. Or you can set up a VPS and like pay $10 a month to do it. On a phone as well, it is possible. I have seen people setting up on a phone. That one's probably going to be a little bit more complicated to set up. What I also have been seeing people do is, I don't know if I have them here. Yeah. So what I was about to do today as well is you can set it up with, oh, here it is. You can set it up with these Meta glasses now, where you can wear these and it can connect to your CloudBot. So it's basically like the glasses that Tony Stark gave Spider-Man.
Super. Thank you so much for sharing this with us today. I have one question. Yeah, in terms of like token usage, et cetera, you did mention that some people are using Mac Minis and running local models, et cetera. Is that really feasible, or just like the model's not that powerful? And because you could save a lot of money that way, it seems like, right? But is it a lot of people doing this, or is it just like not powerful enough, and most people are not?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think for about $2,000, if you buy 2 maxed out Mac Minis and put them together, you can run Kimi K 2.5, which competes with Cloud Opus 4.5 for one of the top models. So if you're willing to spend that money, it can get there. That being said, there's also just cost of the electricity and things like that. Overall, I don't think it actually makes sense for almost anyone out there to have this sort of setup. And even for the Mac Mini, which is like $600, those open source models, they're not that great. And I don't think anybody's using that much low quality AI where they would want that over like just paying for Kimi 2.5. So yeah, overall, I don't see the use cases for the open source yet. That being said, I think like in the next year, most people will probably just be using open source because it's going to become so good and match the level of the paid stuff that we have going on right now.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Super. I will follow. I'll send this all to you all. Thank you for watching today. I'll send you an email with the link to this if you want to rewatch. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, Super. Anything else you want to share with the group before we conclude today?
No, that's all. If you guys have any questions, feel free to DM me on LinkedIn. And yeah, thanks everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you.